Welcome back, everyone, to the Coaching Space podcast with me, Justin Bodel, a place where I look at the people side of performance. My guest today is the wonderful Liesel Scott. She is a strategic leadership and inclusive culture consultant. She has a wealth of experience having worked across South Africa, UK, and all across Europe. She is a certified associate level coach. She has a master's in philosophy from the University of Stellenbosch. And in 2015, she got to study under Dr. Brené Brown in London and is now one of a small group of certified Dare to Lead facilitators globally. Liesel is currently the co-founder and one of the facilitators for her company Open Circles, a space where they explore ideas around vulnerability, around courage, around empathy, and using those to create more inclusive cultures. In today's episode, we talk about vulnerability. We talk about Brené Brown's work and what drew Liesel into that space. We understand a bit more around what vulnerability actually is and what it isn't. We talk about how we as parents or coaches or teachers can apply some of that thinking into our lives. And we finish off with a talk around inclusivity and the role that that plays in our society today. I absolutely loved my conversation with Liesel. It was a great morning spent unpacking this idea of vulnerability, and I hope that you enjoy. Well, good morning, Liesel. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Just. It's a pleasure to meet with you today and have this chat.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's such an interesting area, this idea of vulnerability. And so my first question really, I suppose, is what is it that drew you to the work of Brené Brown and her focus on vulnerability?
Sure, that is a big question, but I think the simplest answer just is that I've always been fascinated by human behavior and what makes us tick as people and the dynamics between people. And so Brené Brown, as you know, is first and foremost a researcher. And so I think her gift to the world is that she is able to take kind of these thousands and thousands of pieces of data, which really represent people's lived experiences and their stories, and see the patterns and the universal human truths that exist within those stories around how we engage with each other, how we engage with ourselves, and then to really play those concepts back to us in a way that's just so accessible and articulate so that we can see ourselves in those stories. And then that becomes really transformational.
Yeah.
I think as well, just meeting her and working with her, which I had the privilege to do in the UK in 2015, she's just also incredibly warm and funny and authentic. So how she shows up online in her podcasts and videos, etc., is exactly how she is in person. And I really admire that about her.
Wow.
You know, it's not, she is very widely regarded as one of the kind of thought leaders of our time. And yet she's not about the ego or the celebrity. It's very much about the integrity of the work and the integrity of the research.
Yes.
And so that is kind of the undergirding of all of her work, and that brings kind of a lot of rigor and authenticity to it.
Yes. Amazing. It must have been an amazing experience having the chance to meet her and to kind of and what sort of, you know, why vulnerability? Why did that sort of, I mean, you've worked in a couple of different areas. How did you sort of pick up on that as sort of a theme or an idea to kind of study or kind of upskill yourself?
Yeah. So I think, you know, if you think about that question of why vulnerability, the concept of vulnerability resonates with people, I think that innately we are all social creatures as human beings. And we all have this innate need to be seen, to be deeply seen and valued for who we are. And yet we struggle with feeling like who we really are is enough. So we grapple with, and this is where her work around shame is so helpful, feelings of, I'm not good enough. Am I interesting enough? Am I clever enough? Am I smart enough? Am I, you know, all of these questions that we grapple with. And so when we don't feel enough, what we often do is wear a mask or armor up, to use Brené's language, in order to look perfect or cool, calm, and in control, or feeling like we're the expert or we know all the answers. And often that armoring up process is what becomes a barrier to connection. So we want to be seen, we want connection, and yet we struggle to sometimes be real with people. And so this realization that vulnerability is the birthplace of connection, I think has connected very powerfully with people. But it's bigger than that. It's more than just relational vulnerability in terms of my connection with you and us being able to be real with each other.
Yes.
There's an example or a story that Brené shared, which has always stuck with me. And she spoke about a time when she was speaking at a conference. She was the keynote speaker.
Yeah.
And it was a conference where there was a sign language interpreter who was on the stage with her. And just before she was about to go on, they grappled with this question of what is the sign for vulnerability? And the sign language interpreter said, it's sort of the sign of like being weak at the knees. And Brené's like, no, that's not what vulnerability is.
Wow.
And so literally before they went on stage, they had to figure out a new sign for vulnerability. And the sign that they then used was this idea of being open-hearted.
Wow.
And I think that's so incredible, because that is what vulnerability is. It's about being open-hearted to each other, but also being open-hearted towards, if I think in the business sense as a leader, am I being open-minded or open-hearted to listening to people, feeling like I can show up not as the expert or the one who has to know all the answers, but really being deeply curious and being able to learn from other people. And being able to navigate complex problems that don't have quick fixes and sit in the discomfort of that. Is
and be okay with that.
Kind of the broader scope of what vulnerability entails.
Absolutely. Wow.
It's exciting. It's an exciting and rich and like very beautiful conversation to talk about vulnerability.
Yes. So, I mean, you may have touched on it a little bit already, but what is vulnerability to you? You know, how do you personally sort of define it now?
So I think that we all know the feeling of vulnerability, that sort of scary, uncomfortable feeling. But what's definitely happening more and more is that people are able to name that feeling and name it as vulnerability and recognize and notice it when they feel it.
Yes.
But for me, I would say that it's that feeling of stepping into the unknown, where you're not quite sure how something's going to land, how a decision's going to play out, how something's going to be received. And that feels really uncomfortable and scary at times.
Yes.
And it's because of that unknown and risky feeling associated with vulnerability that it, as Brené says, it's our most accurate measure of courage. Wow. Because if things were predictable and like a guarantee that your decision would work out like you wanted to, then it wouldn't require courage. So we really have to kind of debunk this myth that vulnerability is weak at the knees, and it actually is our greatest indicator of courage. And the more you are able to feel the discomfort and push through it and stay true to your values, then your greater capacity for courage. So we need to be able to notice when we're in vulnerability, not check out, push through. And just thinking of an example from my own life, my husband and I have got two daughters who are tweens now, so getting old, getting big, which is another challenge and exercise in vulnerability itself. But at the end of last year, we made a really reflective but quite last minute decision to change schools for my eldest daughter. And that was super vulnerable because she was going into grade 6. It's not like a normal time to change schools. And so I think when you're making a vulnerable decision like that, where you're not sure if it's right or wrong, you really, really need to check in with your why. Am I acting out of fear, or am I making this decision in line with my values? And that's really important, because vulnerability is not just about stepping into the unknown, being reckless or kind of oversharing your personal details with someone you hardly know. If you're sharing a story with someone and being vulnerable, it's about going, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to build connection with this person, or am I just looking for attention or trying to impress? So we navigate vulnerability with clarity of our why and our values, and that gives us the courage or the momentum almost to step into the unknown.
Yes, I love that. And kind of, like you say, it's that balance of really understanding, like, I want to step into something new, or is this, yes, this may be unknown and there may be some risk involved, but kind of really resonating with why you're taking that step, and what's driving it, and what the intent is behind it.
Absolutely. Because we also know from the Brené's research that if you're going to be brave with your life, you are going to experience failure. You're going to have, you're not going to keep everyone happy all the time. You're going to piss someone off, or you're going to be criticized. And that can throw you completely. And so part of the courage building skill set is that ability to be clear on your why, as I've just said, and the values that brought you into that decision, or that situation, or that relationship in the first place. And then the ability to pick yourself up and not be defined by those failures, but be able to offer yourself some self-compassion, and move on, and be able to move through failure, because often that's what holds us back as well, as that fear of failure.
That fear of failure. So true. And why do you think that this work has resonated so much with people? You know, I mean, it's, you know, her work now, I mean, you're seeing it in schools, you're seeing it in business, you're seeing it in sport. You know, why do you think it's resonated so deeply with people, and you're kind of seeing it popping up all over the place?
I think that partly to this point I shared earlier around us really needing connection. If you kind of or look into the research around mental health, etc. I was actually reading a study just last week around one of the biggest predictors of longevity, besides kind of not drinking over too much or smoking, etc., is actually your sense of social connection.
Wow.
So our well-being is so attached to feeling seen and heard, and having at least one person that is a safe space for you. And so I think we're all desperate for that. And we live in a world where we have so much connectivity through the internet and social media, but not a whole lot of connection, because of this fear of being real with people, and wondering if am I enough? Is my story enough? Am I interesting enough, etc. So that's one reason definitely why it's resonated. And I think if I think from a leadership point of view, in the Dare to Lead research, which was a 7-year research study off the back of the previous 15 plus years of research that she had done, what came out so strongly in the interviews that were done with leaders across the world from every continent was this idea that we absolutely need braver leaders, and we need more courageous cultures. And by that I mean a culture where it's normalized to ask for help, to challenge, to give feedback, to not know the answers. And to be able to sit with a complex, messy, difficult problem that feels unsolvable, and not to check out or get cynical or jaded, but to stay curious and to keep digging and probing until insight or clarity emerges. So those skills, those courage skills, of which vulnerability is at the heart of that skill set, is absolutely what's needed in terms of the leadership and the business and the political landscape that we navigate at the moment. I mean, even with regards to the environment and finding solutions around our planet, we absolutely need braver leaders who can lean into vulnerability and imagine a future that is different from the status quo. So I think that's really why her work is just so timeless and so relevant.
I mean, I've seen it a bit, you know, I work in a bit of a sporting context as well, on the side. And I've seen also in the sports world, particularly, you know, male dominated sports, where there's the sense of showing your fears or your emotions or your anxiety or your stress, like, is kind of not really the done thing. How just having people, particularly the leaders or the seniors in the team, opening up and sharing honestly, it just that awareness and just that kind of creating that or setting that example already makes such a difference. And I think, like, we're seeing it more with, you know, kind of coaches understanding that and players understanding that. Like I've had great examples, and I've used the word vulnerability and said, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, vulnerably. But like just having a senior player actually say, I'm actually really nervous for this game, or, and to kind of give permission to the others to go like, oh, it's okay. Like if he's nervous, because we're all sort of wanting to show that we're ready for it and we're up for it. But, we're all human. We all feel anxious at some point. We all feel nervous. We all have fears. And just those little steps, I think, are really making a big difference.
Sure, that's so powerful. And those little fears and those insecurities that we all have that you speak about, that's where shame shows up, making us feel like we're not good enough, and that it's just us. Everyone else seems to be fine.
Yes.
And it's just me. So what's wrong with me? Why am I not coping? Why am I feeling the way that I do? And then we want to hide that because we want to appear to be fine like everyone else, but everyone's going through the same thing. And the more, and when someone, and it's especially impactful when that person holds power, whether it's social power or positional power in a group, when someone goes, sure, this is what I'm struggling with. Or I don't know the answer to this. It absolutely, as you say, it gives permission. It almost just step changes the dynamic in the group.
Totally.
Creates that psychological safety. And it's just goosebump stuff when that happens. And it's a game changer.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, we've seen the same now with COVID, so we've also been, from a team point of view, having opportunities to meet and just share a little bit about how we're all coping. Sometimes just surviving, and that's always the message that comes out. People just going, oh, it's so, like, you feel the sense of like, okay, I'm not the only one who's like having a tough week, or it's been a tough month, or I feel like I'm just scraping through. And I think exactly that, just that kind of feeling of connectivity, actually, like you say, almost that feeling of like, I'm not alone, we're all going through this. I think is really powerful.
It is. I think that has been one of the gifts of COVID, Justin, you're right, is that it's forced us to be real with the complexities of our lives and the multiple roles we play. And I think, I can't speak for men because I'm a woman, but I know for women, one of the biggest shame triggers is around feeling like you've got to look perfect, act perfect, have it all under control and not break a sweat. And so if I'm a working mom, I've got to have that under control. I've got to, or parenting, I've got to do that right as well. And I think COVID's just given us permission to go, this is me, imperfect. I'm trying my best to do it all. And some days will be better than others. And just showing up with the real,
absolutely,
on Zoom or Teams or whatever it's been. That has been one of the gifts of COVID, that we've been able to take the mask off a little bit with each other, and hopefully that remains true as we claw our way out of this crazy time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, just touching on that. So, how can we as individuals or leaders or parents, how can we sort of start to display more this idea of vulnerability? What are some practical things that we could start to do to just sort of shift the dial a little bit and actually step into the space?
So I think that is a really beautiful question. And coming back to this whole idea of intent, it's really important to not try and fake vulnerability, because or fall into the trap of oversharing and feeling like now I need to show up as my vulnerable self and cry in front of people or tell some story. That people see through that inauthenticity very quickly. So I think it's getting clear on your intent, and then asking yourself questions around, where do I want to be braver in my life? And what does vulnerability look like for me? So maybe as a leader, it's around, I want to be braver at just sitting with people and asking questions and getting feedback and hearing their ideas, and not feeling like I have always got to know the answer.
Yes.
It's okay to be wrong,
Yeah.
etc. Or it's okay to say we don't have a clear plan yet, but we're curious and we exploring, and that's where we're at right now, and that's
Yeah.
enough for
Yeah.
now. So yeah, being like reflecting on your own world and your own dynamics and thinking about or opportunities for what courage and vulnerability looks like for you.
Yeah.
In the parenting space, gosh, I think parenting is vulnerability personified. It is
Yes.
every single day. You don't know what you're going to get, and every
Yeah.
season presents different challenges, and you always feel out of your depth, and you feel overly invested because you don't want to stuff it up because it's your child.
Yeah.
But I think if I look at my own life, I think it feels vulnerable not knowing how I can possibly equip my children for the world that they will grow up in and have to navigate. And so I can feel, for me, sometimes that armoring up looks like hypervigilance or hyper control or almost just over parenting.
Yeah.
And being, and for me, vulnerability or courage looks like just letting go a little bit and trusting the process and trusting my kids as well to make decisions and the values you've instilled in them, etc. So
Yeah.
I think that in terms of applying it in your own life, where can you be braver and what's your intent, and getting clear on your values and how you can express those values more fully,
Yes.
wherever you find yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Be
Lovely.
real, people around you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right, and I love that. And I mean, you've used the word brave. Where can you be brave? Bravery. And exactly that is where can we just step a little bit? And like you say, you don't want it to be inauthentic, but you also don't want to sort of overwhelm people. Suddenly you're kind of pouring out all these things, all these stories, and it can be a bit too much for people sometimes. So
Totally.
I think that's really great advice. Is kind of look for those one or two areas and try and step and be a little bit more brave as you kind of step into that space.
And you'll feel the feeling when it gets scary. So that's what's great about vulnerability. It's got a physiological charge to it. It feels uncomfortable. It feels scary. And often that scary feeling is when we check out and go, oh, if I'm feeling nervous, then I'm not ready for this.
Yes.
And again, one of Brené's quotes, which is so powerful, is that we can be brave and afraid at the same time. And it's not fear that gets in the way of courage, it's armor. It's like hiding behind our mask or our armor because we're afraid, as opposed to pushing through the fear and showing up anyway, even when we can't predict or control the outcome.
Yes.
Being true to our values, staying in our authenticity and integrity.
That's powerful.
It's okay to feel scared and uncomfortable. That's when courage is happening.
Yes.
So
sure. I love that. That's a really, really powerful image. Now shifting the focus a little bit, I know you obviously working now a lot in the area of sort of inclusivity. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about that, and also how does that play a role in our performance as leaders, as teams, as parents, etc.
Yes. So I mean, the whole topic of diversity and inclusivity is a big one. It's a complex one. And we know as South Africans, it's a conversation layered with so much history and trauma and fracturedness, and yet we as South Africans need to move forward. We need to build more inclusive cultures when it comes to schools, when it comes to organizations. What I find, and this came up in the Dare to Lead research as well, is one of the massive barriers to inclusivity, because you can change the face of an organization or of a school through having more diversity and more representation of gender, race, etc. But inclusivity refers a lot to the culture and the felt experience. Does everyone in this place feel a sense of belonging and feel like they can bring their whole self to work or to school? And so conversations, around inclusivity and what's getting in the way, and that is often so hard for people, because when we're talking about things like race or gender inequalities or injustices, or concepts like power and privilege, and who holds power and who has privilege. It's so fraught with feelings of, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to stuff this up and make a mistake.
Yeah.
And then I can't take it back, and maybe I've offended someone. So I'd rather not go there.
Yeah.
And so, but avoiding these conversations because they make us uncomfortable is just absolutely not okay. We need to skill up for hard, vulnerable conversations, and be able to show up in those conversations with curiosity and humility and a willingness to learn and take responsibility for how we might be unintentionally impacting on other people that could be hurtful towards them through our own blind spots and biases. So I think that the courage building skill set, I'm particularly passionate about applying it into the space of diversity and inclusion, because it's such a massive conversation in our country and in the world at the moment. How do we move people from the sense of polarization, us versus them, judgment, pointing fingers, to a place where people can truly listen to each other in a kind, respectful way, where we're going to make mistakes, we're going to say the wrong thing, but being willing to learn.
Yes.
And so, that's one part of it. I think also where courage and vulnerability plays a big role is in our own learning, unlearning, and self-awareness. And I had a experience which I felt really ashamed of, where it was a couple of months ago. I was shopping for a birthday present for someone, and I didn't have a lot of time, and I ran into a factory shop looking for a running t-shirt for a friend of mine, and I was trying to find a size, and out of the corner of my eye I saw this young female Black lady, and asked her, automatically it came out of my mouth, how do I find the right size? And she looked at me and said, I don't work here. And it was that moment of shame where I had to take accountability for the assumptions I made about this person based on their race, their gender, and their age. And those are moments of truth where you go, wow, okay, I need to check myself. I need to check my blind spots and learn from it, and obviously apologize. But you feel that shame in those moments, and it's easy to shut down and get defensive, or to just miss the learning moment, instead of growing our self-awareness, because we all have so much learning and unlearning to do in this space. And it's hard.
It is hard,
but we can't check out. So I think that
have you, sorry to I know you've done some work in the schooling space in particular. Is this, are you seeing a bit of a shift maybe in a younger generation, or are you still seeing that there is quite a lot of difference and struggle in kind of bringing these conversations together?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Just. I mean, so part of the work that I do, obviously we've got the Dare to Lead curriculum, which is about building leadership muscle for building the courage muscle with leaders and the capacity to navigate vulnerability. And then another piece of the work that I do with two colleagues of mine, Jana Niehaus and Vicky Simpson, we've developed this methodology called Open Circles, which is really using the power of dialogue to create safe and stretching spaces for hard conversations around diversity and inclusion. And when it comes to schools, what we're finding is that young people they want to talk, they are educated, they are literate, they are aware of the dynamics and the complexities, and they want to engage, but often teachers are, just like I said earlier, scared and out of their depth and don't want to say the wrong thing. And so it just makes it really, really hard. And so upskilling teachers and helping them to become practiced in dialogue and in listening and having their own assumptions challenged and learning from other people's stories and lived experiences is giving them the muscle to hold that space and hold those conversations in the classroom as well. So, I mean, look, it takes time, and it is a journey, but we want to meet people where they're at and then keep growing and growing in terms of, as I said, of our ability or our threshold
Yes.
to have these hard conversations, because when we can humanize each other and not in a kind of rainbow nation kind of way where we don't see color. We are different, and we have different stories and different pasts that have either been easier or not easy at all. And how that then plays out in the workplace or in schools, we have to create safe spaces to process those differences and to hear each other's stories.
Yes.
And in that way to become truly more inclusive.
Absolutely.
Where everyone can feel seen and heard.
Yeah. And I love that. I know the Sharks rugby team have been a big, a great example actually of that. Like on their caps, they have a thing that says, I do see color, we see color. And they are actually I think the most diverse rugby team in South Africa at the moment. But it's been driven from the top. And like you said, almost actually being open and saying this, let's talk about it. We can't hide away from it. Let's make it a topic on the agenda, and let's be open about it and real and appreciate, like you said, different people's stories and where they've come from and the lens that they look through life, look at life through. So
absolutely. And then the courage to be called out.
Yeah.
And to receive that as a learning moment.
Yes.
And receive it to feel the shame, because you do feel shame, like the example I shared from my own, a small story from my own life. You do feel the shame, but to not shut down because of the shame, but to go, okay, tell me more. I need to learn. I need to listen.
Yes.
And that's ultimately the stance that is going to move us forward.
Amazing. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I've kept you for a long time already. I wanted to ask you just one final question. You've worked obviously a lot. I mean, so many years now in leadership, culture work, self-development. Is there one sort of really key learning or something that you've taken out of all of that work? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that really resonates that sort of sticks with you?
That is a big question. I think that I'm sure you're familiar as well with Carol Dweck's work around mindset, and this idea of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is so critical, because when we feel disillusioned or we feel stuck or we feel like we're never going to solve this problem, or this is way too complex, I don't have energy or capacity, and that fixed mindset just shuts us down from possibility. It shuts us down from engagement. And you see leadership teams in that space where it's very, very difficult to move forward with a fixed mindset, whether you're an individual or a team or even an organization that's stuck in that space. So this idea of having a growth mindset and being open to change, even when it's hard, even when it's unpredictable and scary, and being willing to face the brutal facts and have that combination of both optimism but realism, where you own your story and you own where you're at, and then willing to engage and imagine a different future. That is essential. And it's really exciting and a privilege to work with teams and individuals who have a growth mindset. They might not know all the answers, they might not know what tomorrow looks like, but they're willing to explore and willing to be curious and to learn. I think that's definitely a golden thread through everything that I've done, is that willingness and openness to change.
Yes. Amazing. I think you're so right. And what a powerful note to end it on. Liesel, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful just talking, and thank you for sharing so openly as well and just being very authentic. If people want to get hold of you, or they want to reach out to you, or they want to follow you in some way, how can people connect with you?
So part of my vulnerability is being a little bit more visible on social media. I am on LinkedIn, Liesel Scott. Otherwise, in terms of understanding more about the Dare to Lead work or the work around dialogue, our website is www.opencircles.com. and my email address is all on the website. So you can follow me in that respect. Yeah.
Awesome.
But
Brilliant.
Thank you for having me, Just. It's always wonderful to talk to you, and well done on pursuing these conversations that stretch us all and keep us all engaged. It's really awesome.
No, thank you so much. Cool. Thanks, Liesel. We'll chat soon.
Okay, awesome.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.